All right, we're live. So the mic's hot. Don't say anything you want to regret.
Oh, can I cuss a little bit or no
Yeah,
cussing?
you can curse
Live?
whatever you want. Just
All right.
no like nothing too vulgar, you know. Keep it keep it
Keep it
if you know if my mom was watching, like, how do you wanna
biblical.
what do you want her to hear? I'm just kidding.
PG-13,
Um,
right? One.
that's right.
Sweet.
No, I curse in front of my mom every once in a while because she doesn't like it. But all right, so today we got John Heisler on, and if you can't tell, he just got done saving a few lives. He's in the Dr. Scrubs, and John went from being a PA, one of the best PAs probably in Georgia, had to be. Um,
That's
I
true.
mean, he's got to be at least top five. And then,
I won't deny.
yeah. But anyways, and what, John? Your best month wholesaling was over 100K, I believe, and you bought a few commercial buildings at this point, and you've done quite a lot in just a short period of time, while still saving lives and also just crushing real estate. So, John, let's get into it. So, what got you into real estate?
Yeah. First, thanks for having me on. For those of you who don't know, Gino and Chandler are both freaking awesome. I'm super happy to know both of these dudes, and they have both influenced me and my business a ton. So appreciate being on and appreciate y'all's friendship. It's been
Yeah,
great.
it's glad to
Um,
glad to glad to have that as well.
yeah. How I got started. So I did critical care medicine as a PA for a little over 10 years and thought I would do that forever. I never really planned to get into a real estate business. Actually, at the time, I had one full-time ICU job, a part-time ICU job, and I was teaching faculty at a PA school at the time. So I had kind of three W-2s, and I was working my ass off every single week, probably 60-ish hours. And right at the beginning of COVID, got sick, from a patient in the hospital and missed like 16, 18 days of work. So, I still got my main paycheck, but I lost all my other paychecks. And I was like, man, I need some passive income that pays me so I don't have to trade my time for money as much anymore. So that was my original motivation. Jumped on bigger pockets like a lot of people do and thought I could buy, one or two properties and, go part time and live the life. But any of you guys have owned long-term rentals, that ain't what happened. So I bought a duplex and bought another property, and yeah, they were cash flowing, and in retrospect, they're great deals, but you know, not going part-time off of that. So I jumped into wholesaling kind of mid 2020, right in the middle of COVID, and immediately jumped into one mastermind, started doing direct mail, built my business, did the solopreneur thing for a while. I thought I would be good at sales because I came from a place of talking to families every single day in the ICU, talking about tough stuff. So I'm like, this sales thing will be a piece of cake, but it was absolutely not. I sucked at sales. I didn't get any respect from the sellers like I get at the hospital, and so I really had to teach myself, how to market, how to sell, and there's a lot of self doubt up front, but just kept failing forward, kept pushing through, kept getting a little bit better. Joined several masterminds to get better along the way, and got a couple contracts. This is still super early, a couple months in. So I had kind of a proof of concept, and one of the things we're going to talk about today is how to scale this with a W-2. So I still have my hospital job, obviously, still in the scrubs. And so what I did is I hired faster and scaled faster, and I kind of used some of my advantage of having some money to do that. So I actually hired my first AM before I even cashed my first assignment check. So that felt bold to me at the time. And
I would say that is pretty bold. Most people, that's like the hardest thing to delegate. How'd you know to
uh,
do that, John?
well, I knew, so what I was experiencing. So in ICU, I work, 3 to 6 shifts in a row, and then I'll be off for a bunch of days. So I had time to go on appointments. But what would happen is I'd go on some appointments, I'd talk to sellers, and then I'd lose them in the follow up when I was in the hospital. And so I just knew I needed another salesperson that could pick up the slack when I was tied up. And so that just became the first role that I hired, and it was me and one AM for a long time, basically like a solopreneur and a half. And she's still with me. She's awesome. She's actually on the dispo side now. But so yeah, I did the solopreneur plus one routine for like a year and a half. That was my first hire.
I like that. So what you said, so one of the things you allude to is like since you had the W-2, you had that stable income. What advice would you give to people with a W-2, like thinking of quitting it? Like obviously like you haven't quit yours, so like I know you probably thought a lot about it, but
I have.
how would you, if you have a W-2 and you're thinking about like starting up wholesale, or even if you're doing it, like what kind of advice would you do to them to better leverage it?
Yeah, I mean it's a catch 22. One, your W-2, they call it the golden handcuffs for a reason, especially if you're making decent money and you have kind of a stable job. It can be hard to quit, and it's both helping you, but it's also holding you back a lot. So like Gino and Chandler are always gonna be able to crush me in the wholesale world if I'm dividing my time in the ICU. That's just something I've accepted. What I can do with a stable W-2 is get a bunch of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans that they might not be able to get because I look safer to banks. So I would say before you quit, get it if you want to keep stuff, get as many loans as you can before you officially quit. One of the things that I'm doing is I have a passive income goal that I want to hit before I quit, which is basically replace my entire income with passive income. And when I do that, I'll probably actually quit at that point. Plus, I just like working in the ICU. If I had a job that I didn't like as much, I probably would quit sooner. But
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine the ICU. We talk about it all the time. It's like such an adrenaline rush when people are just coming in there, all kinds of messed stuff, and you just go to work and start saving them.
yeah, it's good and bad, man. It's a drug. It feels like a drug. You're bored some hours, and then the next minute, yeah, you're saving somebody's life. So it's
That's pretty
probably an
cool.
addiction. Yeah.
It's a cycle. So, um, you hired your first acquisition guy. Y'all are going together. Um, what was your deal flow like in that around that time?
And super sporadic. So at the time, we were primarily doing direct mail to start with. That's just the initial mastermind that I joined was really kind of all about direct mail. So that's what we were doing. And the leads that we got when we had leads were good. One of the problems I didn't fully realize that I had is I didn't have enough leads. So something that I tell new folks all the time, if you feel like you're struggling in your business and you don't have the deal flow that you want, look down that entire conveyor belt and make sure you have enough leads coming in first. If you don't have enough leads, you don't have a business. So you got to be marketing all the time, even when you don't have leads. So our deal flow is super sporadic. I would get some months one contract, some months two, the occasional three or four, but it was probably realistically like one and a half contracts a month up front. Thankfully, the market was getting better, and so several of those were wholesales where we made a decent amount of money, 40, 60K spreads up front. So that's kind of what saved us. I was spending a bunch of money on direct mail. Direct mail is expensive if you don't know. And then my dumbass started PPC right after. And so two of the more expensive, low lead number marketing sources right off the front. And the other thing is we weren't good at sales at the time. And so you can't have low leads and be mediocre at sales and really do a good job in this business. So I actually credit Gino with partially saving my business when I met him. I joined Sub2 about maybe 6 months into starting. Met Gino through Sub2. We lived like 7 minutes apart at the time, so we became a little bit of friends. And he told me right off the bat, he's like, dude, you need to get a texter. You need to get a texter. I'm like, all right. So I got the texter. So cheaper lead source in, and the leads doubled, tripled overnight. Were they as high quality as the direct mail leads? Not necessarily, but I just had the lead flow to practice for both me and my AM to get better. I really do think that saved our business at that time.
Yeah, that's like, I think Hermosi talks about it too. He's like, the people who sell gym memberships are usually like the best salesmen because they just do so much. They like sell, thousands of sales a year,
Yeah.
and it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So okay, so you start doing SMS, and that obviously you guys get the reps in. You start to understand how to do sales. Did that just instantly like change the business? Did it bottleneck it? Because like SMS is a lot of leads and not as many are very good. So like, How did that affect y'all's business, your business?
Absolutely. At the time, and first of all, I didn't even know what a lead manager was at that time. So I only had an acquisition manager, and realistically, she was performing the role of a lead manager and an acquisition manager. And I still didn't know what a lead manager was. So my next hire ended up being a part-time second acquisition manager. Uh, he ended up being really awesome. Unfortunately, ended up having life circumstances to have to get out of the business. But he had kind of natural sales skills coupled with what I had learned from sales, from Sub2 and from Gino and from other sources that we picked up. I've since found, by the way, that I'm okay at selling because I can be consistent, but I'm good at teaching selling. I'm better at teaching selling than I am actually doing it. You know, those who can't do teach, right? So I'm pretty good at teaching my team to sell, but I think there's folks in my team that are better at selling. And he was one of those. So once we brought him on, we kind of jumped from that sporadic 1 to 2 range up to kind of 4 consistently. But something for those of you who have been doing this for a little while that you'll experience if you're trying to keep sales folks is our business over the next year and a half started doing this as we would lose good sales folks and have to bring a new person on, and the new person wasn't perfect. We'd have to, kick them to the curb and get another person. So it's its whole struggle in of itself.
Dude, salespeople is like it's like a nightmare in itself. Just it's like its own other part of the business is just training and keeping salespeople. Um,
Absolutely.
so, John, when you said you're better at training salespeople, I think this is like one of the most important skills that if you want to scale a wholesale company to at least not be the bottleneck where you're producing revenue every day in and day out. This is, you gotta it's a skill you gotta learn. So, what would you say are some of the big things that just allow that you feel like you do well and allows you to train salespeople well? Yeah. So how do you feel like you are good at, or like what makes you good at training salespeople?
Yeah, well, coming from the medical world, I had a huge background in education, teaching, and training folks, and ran a lot of education programs over the years in a hospital. So that was kind of naturally what I'm always inclined to do. Part of the reason that I'm a mediocre salesperson is I would start trying to like teach and explain stuff to the seller, and that's a good recipe to spend a whole lot of time on the phone and get nothing done. So I put that skill to good use on our AM. So I feel like I can see where the business needs to go, partly due to all the different mentorships and things that I've joined, and so I can kind of grow and build a team and lead that team. I'm not as best in like the day to day maintenance of things, so and I do love teaching people. So
Yeah, teaching people is definitely. I have that natural tendency to just want to teach people too while I'm on the phone with them. Just like don't do it that way. Like this is what it's all about.
yeah, yep. I've wasted
The-
many hours telling sellers like the entire local market around them, only for them to put list their house with an agent or something.
like John told me the best thing to do with the market is to list it. He sounded pretty convincing.
Yeah, I threw that boomerang too far. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, when they said push away, you said I'll push all the way.
All the way,
I'll push
right
them
to
all
an
the way,
agent.
fully extended. um, so, John, what role would you say in like all of this? Like, because you got the natural like time in your main role, your PA of teaching people and doing this. Like, were you always naturally good, or did you have to learn a little bit about teaching and like the education process? Like, speak on that for a little bit, just like if people don't have any experience.
Yeah, one, you have to obviously, you have to have. I feel pretty strongly you have to have done it yourself. So I've cold called, not for very long because it's terrible, but I have done a couple of days of cold calling. I texted all myself when I first started on launch control when I got into texting before I hired a VA to do it. So I understand the basics of that. I understand you have to understand the feelings, right? I understand the feeling of getting 100 FUs after sending out a batch of text. I understand the feeling of calling for 4 straight hours and no one answers the phone, or getting a bunch of no's. We're getting angry people. I understand the feeling of an AM of calling a bunch of leads you think are hot and everyone wants retail. So I think it really helps that I did all of that myself for a while and can kind of identify with that person, because training is more than just like run this script exactly like this. it's working with that person and seeing what they need and helping them, but also just identifying with what they're going through and allowing them to be open and honest about what barriers are in their way. More than anything, I find myself when I'm doing a good job of talking to my employees and seeing where can I help you do your job better? What barriers do you have to do your job well that I can remove as the owner? And a lot of times if something's not working, it's because I'm in the way. I'm the bottleneck. So I tell myself all the time, like, stop being the bottleneck in your own business,
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's easy to do, especially when you think you can do everything, and
So,
you're just like, yeah.
yeah.
So okay, so at this point, you start doing texting. You're getting more reps. You guys are getting good at sales. You hired some more sales guys. What was kind of the turning point for you?
Um, I, so every time we started getting more contracts, I dumped that money back in the business. For the longest time, I didn't pay myself anything, which I could do having a W-2. That may be a lot harder for someone who doesn't have one. Uh, so that was super beneficial, but I dumped that money right back in the business. So I would hire another texter. We started cold calling at one point. I'd hire another cold caller. Fast forward today, we've got 3 texters, 4 cold callers, 2 lead managers, and 2 AMs, a dispo manager, and a transaction coordinator. So we got like 14-ish employees. But I basically sequentially added somebody at least every 2 months or so to the team. And I just, every time we got a decent deal, I would put that money right back into the business. So definitely recommend doing that. You can't stop marketing. This is such a roller coaster business. We're actually in kind of the down cycle of one right now, and we're about to sell a bunch of our stuff that's been sitting, so we'll be out of it shortly. But we didn't stop marketing. We didn't change our marketing budget one penny through all of that. That's something super important as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's like even some of the guys we talk to on our one-on-ones, and even like what our mentors tell us is like you can't stop marketing because otherwise you don't have anything coming in. Like if you run a report on your business, like at least for us, each out of our revenue we do monthly or just our contracts or our appointments or whatever, just inflow, it's like 75% of it is new. So like if
Yeah.
you stopped marketing, you're going to see a massive decrease in whatever's coming in the front. So
Yeah.
it's like, if you take money from one thing and you just take it out, you're not saving money. You're just losing money. You're losing future money. You're losing
Absolutely.
the potential for future money. It's like if you take 5K out of cold call or whatever it is, and what's the proven marketing source that you can put that $5,000 into, or what's the marketing source that you need to add to? Because a lot of times you can just do more of what's working, and you don't need to diversify until you're getting, probably to that 80, 60, $80,000 a month mark. Is just do one thing,
Right.
do it
Do
really
it really
well.
well. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm not sure the turning points of business were definitely, starting, uh, hiring that first texter. I think when we grew our marketing team to, 2 to 4 VAs who were cold calling and texting, and then had some stability in the sales team, that's when we started really consistently hitting like 4 contracts a month regularly. We would hit it some months, and then some months we'd be back to 0 or 1 if we just had sporadic sales team support or if the leads weren't any good. And
Mm-hmm.
then one of the things that I think is a huge reason for my success is, yeah, you can find all this stuff on free YouTube channels and all that, but I've joined 4 mentorship programs or masterminds, whatever you want to call them, since I started. So basically one every 6 months. And I know you and Gino obviously do a bunch too. It's super important. I mean, the blueprint to have a successful wholesale business is out there. Like, you don't need to recreate the wheel. Like, you don't need to learn all this stuff for yourself. Go find someone who's doing it a little farther ahead than you, and then just replicate what they're doing, and then look up again a quarter later, 6 months later, and go, all right, what is the next hurdle I need to achieve to get my business to the next level? And go find the people that are doing that, or it can help you do that, whether that's through a mastermind program like Gino and Chandler's. So I'm in their program, not to like be a shill for it or anything, but a huge major reason that I'm better is through programs like theirs. You can actually ask someone who's ahead of you in the business, like, hey, I ran into this hurdle last week, what would you do? And that time to improving your business is so much shorter. That's a huge reason we're where we're at, just a couple years in this business. And I definitely wouldn't be where I was at with a W-2 without stuff like that.
Yeah. It's like, it's like a cheat code, really. If you could just look at someone and you don't have to think, you just say, oh, they did that. Okay, let me just do that too. How'd you
Right.
do it again? Oh, you did this? Okay, what'd you do in this scenario? And it's like when you can ask like specific, like this is what's going on, and you hear the way they think about it. You hear the way like all the things they're taking into account. Like they got all these variables, and then they chuck them down into like this decision, and you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about these other three things, and like now the decision is clear. So you just get better and better. So like you can do it on your own in the future. You know, even just a simple process. Like one of the things like all the time we tell people is just like when you get a text lead, like call that person a ton, text them every day, and like you're gonna get more from it. And like that's like 5 seconds of advice that will make you hundreds of thousands of dollars over years, just like
Yep.
from doing one simple process that takes 10 minutes to do. And
Yep.
like there's not a lot of things I don't think you can spend your money on that get you the same ROI as education.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not, it's weird because, the blueprint for wholesale, setting up a successful company is out there. So it's not complicated. It's not easy. It is super hard to do what y'all are doing, what we're doing. It takes daily execution, but it's not rocket science. There's a blueprint out there. You just got to follow it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, call people who have houses. It's like Brent Daniels says, just talk to people who own a house, and eventually you'll buy
Absolutely.
one.
Yep.
It's like
Yep.
it's so simple, but it's like you're like at first you're like I don't believe that shit, and then like
Yep.
the more you do it, you're like actually that's all it takes. So
Yep. It's
it's
the
kind of
hardest thing to
funny.
do, but it's the way to do it.
Yeah. So John, tell us like so where's your team at now? So you went through all of this. You got a lot of education. You hired sales staff. Like and also guys, if you're trying to delegate sales, it's a never ending battle. And like it's a battle you're almost never gonna win. You can only try to win it, and sometimes you'll almost win. So it's not
Absolutely.
easy.
It's
But
funny,
tell
like,
us. Go ahead.
yeah, it's funny, just like, being in a place, like people are like, wow, you guys are successful. Like the thing I was telling you about, like, I don't feel successful per se because there's always that new challenge in front. There's that new thing that you're facing or doing that you're trying to get better at. And yeah, to your point, I think ours is still struggling on consistency on the sales team side. We get closer and closer every day. I think the biggest thing, and we can talk about it in a moment, the commercial stuff that I'm doing, but we I don't have I stay away from everything that's not real estate or I guess medicine. But so like I don't get shiny object syndrome as far as I'm not chasing crypto or doing anything else crazy. Hopefully no one's doing that right now with the market. But I wasn't, during all that I was focusing all my energy on real estate. But within real estate, we were, had the functional wholesale company. We were doing some short-term rentals, both ourselves and with some capital investors. We were doing different commercial deals, which I can talk about how we got into that. And so our focus was very fractured. And there was a time when I was spending a whole lot of money on wholesale and I could get away with it because the market was still going up. So it kind of covered a lot of our sins as far as how much we held the team accountable and, looking at the scorecard every day and being in the CRM every day. Like I wasn't in that every day as much as I am now again. But kind of, the past several months, we've realized we're narrowing our focus to kind of wholesale and commercial. Wholesale generates the active income to dump into these big commercial projects we're doing. And anything else is just, a long-term side investment. It's not our focus. So at least we've been able to focus to two, not as good as you guys who are primarily focused on one, but it's helped a ton just it's crazy getting back in the business and being in the CRM and looking at some leads like, why has no one called this person? And then just little stuff
Like
like
why is this
that.
not a deal?
Right. Like this should have been a deal like 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So just doing that, working, you talk about working in the business or on the business. Like I don't make a ton of sales calls anymore. I may talk to like the top 1% or someone who wants a creative deal or something unique. But what I've got back into doing is being in the CRM every day and kind of, checking on the leads and making sure they're flowing through the process well and then, training up and coaching the staff if it's not where it needs to be. And that's made a huge difference. And when I started doing it again, I was like, man, I should have been doing this every week, but I got sidetracked by everything else going on. So I think we're trying to stabilize what we have. So we're growing slightly, but we're really more just making sure we're doing a good job coaching and managing our team, doing scorecards, accountability, just all the basics of like actually running a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so. There's two things I want to say. Is one, this is like what our mentor tells us every single week we talk to him. Is you have to operate different when you're in time of peace versus in time of war. Right now we're in time of war. Real estate's going like this, and the thing that is most important is great operators are going to get average results, and average operators are going to get out of business results. So make sure, like what John's saying is spot on. Like I went into our CRM, I hadn't been in the leads pipe, I haven't been in like the lead manager's pipeline in a while. Far too, like it's almost embarrassing to say like the result of what I found is that we had 450 hot leads, and I was like, "Are you joking? We have 450 hot leads." I'm like going through there reading the motivation notes. I'm like, inherit the property. Basically, he's like wanting to sell for like $1. Like it's like basically wants to give us the property, and it's like not even been giving an offer. And I'm just like, you got to be joking. So, anyways, we went in there and fixed that up. So, just dialing in everything that's going on is gonna make a big difference. And there's always those cracks and those holes, and they're gonna ebb and they're gonna flow and they're gonna get bigger and smaller. But just having the accountability to make sure the results happen is definitely a big part of the problem. So I would definitely say right now you got to be dialed in more than ever.
Yeah. So we realize that a hair too late, but we're working hard on it right now. I think we're in a better place than we were even just a month ago, pushing on that. So
yeah, for sure. So I like that. So now you're focused on, if I heard you correctly, I think you said you were focused on mainly, are you still doing the short terms and the wholesale? Is that what it is?
we have 5 short terms with capital investors, and we have kind of a guest relations manager who handles the day-to-day on those. So we try to make those as hands-off as possible. There was a time when I wanted double digits of those a year, but I think right now, just the way the market's going, it's important to focus on wholesale, is generating the active income and kind of big commercial deals. So I can kind of share how we got into that, if you want.
Yeah, let's talk about how do you go from single family to commercial, because the big jump most people want to make the leap to.
So, like when I was talking about earlier how I hired my AM before I cashed my first assignment check, I got my first commercial deal under contract also before I cashed my first assignment check. So I've kind of grown in both worlds at the same time. So it was kind of just a freak accident. One of my direct mail campaigns ended up going to this guy's warehouse, and he called me up and was like, "Hey, it's not a house, but if you want to come look at my warehouse, you're welcome to." I was like, "Sure." I don't know anything about warehouses, but why don't I go look? So I went around and walked it with him and faked it like I knew what I was talking about, and left.
Oh, I got 10 of these.
I'm like, yeah, I know all about warehouses. I know what that big giant transformer does and all that. And left and was like, man, that's because I think he only wanted like 500K for it, and it was, I don't remember how big it was. Maybe I'm not gonna guess. I can't remember. But it seemed like a deal. So I was like, who do I know that has a clue if this is a deal or not? Thankfully, I had been going to, at the time, some of the local RIA meetups, and had met a guy who he's like, I'm all commercial. I pivoted from residential. I barely knew his name, but I reached out to the leader and was like, hey, do you have that guy's phone number? And I just called him up and was like, hey, this might be a deal. Like, what do you think? And he listened to everything, looked it up, and he's like, that might be a deal. So we got under contract, and he kind of helped me through that process. The seller ended up being crazy. We ended up not buying that, which was a blessing in disguise. But I became friends with that person, and we ended up buying two 20,000 square foot office buildings in College Park together, based on that friendship I got from trying to get that warehouse under contract. And he had bought a couple of office buildings before that, so I kind of saw his building, saw the proof of concept that it might work, and but he had never bought anything that big. So these two were on bankruptcy court. We got them under $1 million for 40,000 square foot, so like $20 a square foot in Atlanta, which is obscene.
That's like a rent price.
Absolutely. One of them just needed cosmetic work, we thought. The other one needed a lot more work. So we got it under contract. How we financed it is we got a hard money loan for 70-80% of it, plus the construction loan from the hard money lender. But then we had another 20% of a large amount of money to cover, which I didn't have at the time. And I went out and talked to some of the docs I'd worked with at a different hospital and got them to commit to be capital investors as private money lenders on the deal. And so we went to the closing table with a hard money loan, a construction loan, and 2 private money lenders. And so actually got cut a check at closing for that property to us with none of our own money in it at the beginning. Now, a big project ended up, the cosmetic renovation we thought was going to be
Before you get into the renovation, how'd you find these warehouses?
So actually on the MLS, and that's what's cool about commercial compared to residential. Maybe now you can find a deal on the MLS for residential, but you certainly couldn't in the last couple of years. But there's big stuff sitting on the MLS, or the commercial version of the MLS. These had been on the market for 2 years, and they were on the market for 1.2 million. We offered 800 and ended up getting it. So don't be afraid to lowball. Don't be afraid to call up agent and just throw out numbers on something you think might work and make it a deal. One of the buildings has 30. So basically the concept is small business office. So there's 35 tenants in each building roughly. So each person is paying monthly for a 1 or 2 room office for like $700 for 1 room kind of scenario. So I knew that would work from the other guys' other building, so I had a kind of a proof of concept. So I just made a pitch deck. I'd never made a pitch deck before. I found people who had pitch decks and took theirs and then just made one out of that. I made a 5-year profit and loss, and
I'm it sure ended up being super accurate.
I know, super accurate. Just made it all up. It was an educated guess. It ended up, but we bought it so well. We did encounter problems obviously along the way, but it still made money. Fast forward today, we've renovated it, we've refinanced it. It cash flows every month. We got those private money lenders their money back, and they're going to get cash flow for as long as we own the building now. So that the kind of style commercial we're trying to do now is these big empty buildings we can get for cheap. We're trying to figure out what is the highest and best use for them. And then we're trying to buy them creatively with bank money and private money lenders, and then turning them into whatever works best for that particular scenario. We've got 2 going on right now. One's under demo that's going to be an office building we're turning into self-storage, and one we're still in due diligence period on, but we're thinking of turning, it's an old school, and we think we're going to turn it into an assisted living facility. So now, am I an expert in any of those things? Hell no. So what we've learned, what's awesome in commercial is I don't do anything without partners. We got several partners on all of these deals, and so we bring the person with expertise to the deal, and there's enough equity and meat on the bone on these big commercial deals that you can bring in someone who knows what they're doing. If you don't, so we're good at finding property and putting deals together. So then we just partner with people who are good at self-storage or good at assisted living or things like that, to make the deal work. So
I like that. That's exciting. So I have a question, like on the MLS, is a strategy for marketing just going and lowballing everyone, or is it just?
So between the 2 of us, we literally either old school drive for dollars, or the biggest thing is go on Craigslist, LoopNet, and just look at properties every single day. And we didn't just spam lowball at first. First, we tried to get a feel for, what does this size building that I'm targeting go for on the open market in my town or my area?
Hmm.
And once we had a feel for that a little bit, which is going to take you some time because commercial feels kind of foreign if you're used to residential. Once you've kind of got an idea of that, then you can spot ones that might be deals, and those, yeah, we just lowball. And if they say no, like who cares? It's not a big deal. We actually got a agent who would just make. She was totally fine with making the lowball offers for us. Um, some agents won't do that. She was totally fine with offering 50% of what they were asking, or 60, or whatever we wanted, and so we made a bunch of offers. And commercial, like we always say, you just need one in wholesale. Commercial, you really just need one.
Hmm. One
One
home
more.
run.
Yep, that's it. So
It, so that's funny. What kind of resources were you using? Just did you join another mastermind for commercial, or is it just kind of like look around the area?
so I haven't really found one that suits the needs of what we're looking for. So we're in Collective Genius now, which has some folks who do commercial, so kind of expanding that way a little bit. But just found local folks who knew bits and pieces of what we were trying to do, and then would piece them together for each deal. And really, I think I can't remember when we were talking about this, but I love trying new things. I'm okay with failing at stuff and getting better. And if you're doing wholesale, you're probably that way too. That is super applicable to commercial, because I'm not afraid to not know anything about self storage, but still do a self storage deal, with the right resources and people in place.
Mm, yeah, for sure. What do how many? Because also like with commercial, like I have a couple buddies who do like several syndications or here and there. I know for multifamily, like the bank loans, everyone there's like five checks and balances on the numbers and like what's the use and all this. Is it similar for what you're doing, or is it more like the Wild West because you're kind of doing some more conversion type plays and it's a little bit? I don't know if it's speculative. I don't think necessarily think it is because you obviously are bringing in experts. But how does the financing work like for when you present that?
Yeah. So the bank. So far, banks have really loved the deals we've brought them. Basically, so we call this value add commercial, by the way. So we're not buying stabilized, triple net lease Dollar Generals or anything like that.
Hmm.
We're looking for property that's either vacant or is being underutilized. Maybe it's under rented or it's under poor management. And then basically what we're doing is we're bringing pitch decks now to banks and private money lenders separately to get that capital stack. And we've had good success with banks because really what they want to see is, here's what the property costs. And with our model, they're seeing that we're buying the property super cheap because it's distressed. And we have a concrete plan on how to make it profitable. So, and we'll show them now that we have a little bit of, back history on what we've been able to do. That gives them some confidence as well. But we didn't have that the first time, and we still got it done. But yeah, we kind of have a plan to show them what we're going to do. So on the storage deal, for example, it's 83,000 square foot building, office building. We bought it for 825, so $11 a square foot, or 875. So it's super cheap.
This is
Um,
dirt.
like you can't lose if you buy that cheap. Then we had a kind of a concrete plan of how much it would cost to convert the building to self storage, which took a month of research, talking to different companies and whatnot. And then we knew how much gross revenue it would make by kind of comparing it to the area. So we were able to come up with the property's going to make, and it was like 800,000 annual gross income, based on the number of units it could get. We knew roughly what storage expenses were based on the partner in the deal who's done a lot of storage. He's like, your expenses are going to average 45%. So we just put that in the model. And so we could kind of roughly come up with what our net operating income was going to be. And then we could figure out what the building would be worth. So we really could sell the building to both the bank and private money lenders on saying, it's going to gross this. Here's his expenses. Here's how much it's going to make every year. And when we stabilize it, we're going to take this building we bought for 825. We're going to put a couple million into it, and it's going to be worth 5 to 7 million when we're all said and done. And so when you can present it that way, the bank bought it. Now they did make us get a feasibility study to kind of prove that we weren't the only crazy people that thought that, and that market study ended up backing us up. So Local banks in particular will do these kinds of deals because they're more interested in the relationship, they're more interested in the property. You can convince them with things like pitch decks that you can't, you're not going to convince Wells Fargo to do that with your rinky-dink PowerPoint. But local bank down the road, you can talk to the person making the decision, and it's much more likely to happen.
Yeah, I like that. That's a definitely it's definitely a different world, and I think I'm excited to get into it. So, yeah, I think that y'all are doing some super cool stuff, especially on the commercial side. It's just the conversions. Like honestly, it's like a lot of the creativity just to come up with like how are you gonna do this deal and how can you make it monetize and
Yeah.
the numbers. Obviously, the numbers work if you can execute. So.
Yeah.
Exciting.
The thing we haven't figured out how to do is to make them make money quicker than like 3 years, which is why we're still spending so much time growing the wholesale business, because then we have the active income to survive to be able to do these big deals. So that's kind of our strategy.
Yeah. You keep the cash flow coming in so you can have that longer time horizon. Yeah. Definitely the way to go. So John, I appreciate you coming on. I think you gave a lot of really good value. Also had a truly just honestly, you have a great story. Is still somehow saving lives and doing, multi-million-dollar commercial deals and, crushing wholesale as well. It's pretty impressive. I don't know how you have time for a wife and kids. So.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love real estate. Love putting deals together. Love growing and getting better, and okay with trying stuff and failing. And so that's worked out so far.
Yeah, I like it. What would you like to leave the listeners with if they're either getting going or just early in their journey?
I remember when I was doing super sporadic deals and there were several months where I was like, I'm not sure I can afford to pay the market anymore. You have to power through that time and make the calls, be consistent. It doesn't matter if you're the best salesperson in the world. I'm not. Gino is way better than me. Pace is way better than me. But you don't have to be the best. You just got to show up and be consistent. Put in the work every day, get a little bit better every day, and I think that's what got me where I'm at. So that time is hard. Honestly, each part is hard. What we're doing now, trying to stabilize the business, is hard. But being a solopreneur is super hard because it just feels lonely. Get yourself around folks doing what you're doing, join groups, join masterminds, and that'll keep you from quitting when stuff gets hard. Power through it.
100%. It's easy to also isolate yourself too. So just forcing yourself to go to meetups, forcing yourself to hop on random Zoom calls with people, even if you don't really want to. It's definitely a game changer just to make it through, bounce stuff off other people's ideas, off other people's heads, ideas off other people's heads. But yeah, John, appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you guys next week at the podcast.
Yeah.
Adios.
Thanks, Chandler. See y'all.